I'm just going to discuss my affair with K-wires over last 20 years. So I will limit my discussion to the fractures of the phalanges and the metacarpals. One of the places where K-wires, uh, people who hesitate using K-wires is intra-articular fractures in affecting the metacarpophalangeal joint, say a metacarpal head fracture like this. Now it's wonderful to fix this fracture through a volar approach, and you can anatomically reduce it and put up to 5 or 6 interfragmentary screws. However, I think it's a technically demanding procedure, and getting the correct specification of screws may not be easily possible everywhere. Even in city like Mumbai, sometimes you find it difficult to have the sets ready at our disposal when we have a case like this to do. And even in cases like metacarpal head fractures, which are fractures of necessity, because if you don't fix these, it's going to lead to a lot of stiffness. In these cases, a good open reduction. I told you about my choice of volar. This is a picture of a dorsal approach, where again it depends on the fracture anatomy. I would always try to go volar if there is any fragment that requires fixation from the volar side. And once you, just like any other fracture anywhere else in the body, you anatomically reduce them and then hold them with multiple K wires. It's very useful to cut the tip of the K wire, pass the pass the K wires like smooth pins, and then cut them off. And they may or may not be removed later on. Important thing is to restore the articulation. An MCP joint which is stiff is very detrimental to a good hand function, and therefore every attempt should be made to restore articular anatomy, and K wires are quite useful. These are 1 millimeter size K wires. A similar fracture at the thumb metacarpal base. Now, advantage of a thumb is because it is so far away from rest of the digits, you can easily employ a good external fixator to immobilize this, which becomes cumbersome to apply on in the digits MCP joint. So this was a split head of the metacarpal, again fixed using multiple K wires. Now, mind you, this is not a close reduction and a K wire fixation. This is a proper open reduction. Under vision, the fracture has been reduced and held using multiple K wires. Now here, as you can see, almost 5 K wires have been used to hold it. Idea is to get a very stable reduction. These are 0.6 and 0.8 millimeter K wires. So when you are dealing with intra-articular fractures in the hand, the metacarpal and the interphalangeal joint, you require very thin wires, and you require devices to put these thin wires. A high speed, high torque drill is required to pass these. And the fixator over here is used only as a neutralizing device. It is not used as a distractor. There are situations like this where metacarpal head fracture, there is no intra-articular split, and this can be plated. But as I told you, you can very effectively use K wires for any other situation. There are situations which are severely comminuted like this, and as you can see from the swelling of the hand, this also had compartment syndrome and dislocation. These are the situations where perhaps with so much of soft tissue disruption, a very rigid fixation may be a better choice than just K wires. So this was chosen. However, if you do not have access to these rigid devices, K wires will do as good. So metacarpal head fractures are, as I told you, these are almost fractures of necessity. If you can't mobilize them early, they are going to lead to a lot of stiffness, and a metacarpophalangeal joint which is stiff is highly detrimental to a useful hand function. Sometimes external fixator may have to be used only as a temporary device to get your soft tissues to heal, let the bone seal in a where the joint has been destroyed beyond reconstruction, and the external fixator prevents any deformity or contracture of the soft tissues for your future reconstruction, which can be a silastic joint replacement. I have per se almost never done done a primary fusion for non-reconstructible joint. I would rather leave the joint to move even through that jog of movement, painful or otherwise, but it will be a useful movement. Next common fracture in the metacarpal is a metacarpal neck fracture. One of the most important suggestions I could give for this fracture is to always take a good oblique view, because oblique view is the one which is going to give you a correct measure of the deformity. Something which looks not very deformed in a plain AP X-ray looks quite deformed in a oblique view. Most of these fractures can be treated closed. However, they need to be treated. Closed treatment does not mean no treatment. It requires reduction. Good part is most of the metacarpal neck fracture reductions can be done in casualty under a hematoma block or a local infiltration or a Valent type of anesthesia followed by a plaster. The maneuver that we use is called a jazz maneuver. This is a small animation of a jazz maneuver I'm going to show you. Now, after doing a jazz maneuver in which we use the proximal phalanx as a joystick to push the metacarpal head into reduction, and once that is achieved, you can either immobilize the metacarpal in a plaster, or you can use any other method of fixation that you want to use if you do not want to use a plaster. Whenever there is an open fracture of the metacarpal, they always suspect an extensor tendon injury. If you see that the fracture fragments are widely separated, assume that there is going to be an extensor tendon interposition, and in such cases, an open reduction has to be performed. Whenever in doubt, if you think after multiple attempts at close reduction, you still find a gap between the fracture surfaces, suspect a tendon interposition. It's much more commoner than we think. So, as I said, jazz maneuver followed by either a plaster or a K-wire fixation, which is a bouquet technique that we use. So this is how we do a jazz maneuver. As I said, I would give a hematoma block to anesthetize this area, and then flex the proximal phalanx or P1 into as much flexion as you can. Now with the P1 right underneath the metacarpal head, you push P1 in the upward direction, opposite direction of the deformity, and use that to correct the deformity. Very frequently, there is a comminution on the volar aspect of the metacarpal neck. So maintaining it in this position is very difficult. It's not infrequent for me to find hands which are strapped in this position with very poor skin hygiene and the PIP joint gone in severe flexion deformity after this. So clearly taping in this position is not an option. Once this is achieved, the finger will have to be straightened. The metacarpophalangeal joint has to be maintained in about close to 90-degree flexion, if not 90. But the PIP joint will have to be straightened, and therefore something will have to hold this together. That something can be a gutter splint or a gutter plaster on the side that it is affected. Or if you are now going to do any close reduction, close pinning, or if you're planning to put a plate on the lateral side for this, then you can put an axial K wire just to temporarily hold it in that position. Now, even if you straighten the finger, you are not going to lose a reduction. And with this reduction maintained, you can proceed with whichever method of fixation you want to use. One of the popular methods is the bouquet technique, and which is very commonly used for the fifth metacarpal neck fracture. Now, what I'm depicting is a right hand fifth metacarpal neck fracture. This is the insertion of ECU at the base of the fifth metacarpal and the temporary K-wire that has been passed. Your wire entry is right underneath this tendon. So what you need to do is retract the tendon upwards to expose the base from where you are going to make an entry. Now at the base, we make a 3.2 millimeter drill bit hole. Now, why 3.2? 3.2 is the drill bit that is available in the orthopedic set, basic set. So 3.2, otherwise you can use a 3 millimeter as well. So you need to create a 3 millimeter hole here. We are not going to pass a 3 millimeter wire, but we are going to put multiple K wires and therefore a large hole. Now, just like any other tubular bone, whether it is femur, tibia, humerus, radius, ulna, we try to rim the medullary canal for easy passage of an intermedullary device. So we take a 2 millimeter K wire and bend it in this shape and introduce it from this hole into the medullary canal to open up the medullary canal. Now, why do you need to open up the medullary canal? Once the medullary canal is nicely opened up like this, when you use 1 millimeter K wire to pass, it encounters very less resistance. Otherwise, a 1 millimeter K wire, though it is nice and flexible, it is also weak. So it will bend if there is any resistance. By creating a medullary canal, you are ensuring that the wires will go without any resistance. So now you take a 1 millimeter K wire and bend it into this shape. The tip is cut and is bent into a small gentle hockey stick, and it is bent 90 degrees to let me know from outside where this tip is bent. So it acts as an indicator. And then one K wire is put in such a way with this indicator. I know that the point of the wire is here. Now the second wire is put. I will know when this wire is inside that it is pointing upwards by looking at this indicator outside. So the wire is put like this, and then you can put as many wires as you want. Most adult fifth metacarpals will accept 5 to 6 1 millimeter K wires easily. So this is an example of a fifth metacarpal fracture. Fifth metacarpal has the widest medullary canal. And as you can see, there are 6 K wires that have been passed by this method. Why do you want to put so many K wires? It gives a very stable fixation. And with this wire diverging in the head, it gives an excellent rotational stability. So this is early post-op, maybe a few days post-op. You can still see the cutacept color on the screen, and that's early mobilization. There is some amount of extension lag that happens because of the fracture hematoma around the flex extensor tendon, but it quickly improves. In about 3 weeks time, it improves and you see a good rotational alignment and good flexion at the MCP joint. These wires, of course, can be removed later on. A fracture like this can also in the second metacarpal or anything other than the fifth metacarpal a bouquet technique may not be easily possible. So you may need to fix it only with a couple of K wires. However, there are other options available. You can also use a plate to fix them. And of course, it allows a very early mobilization. As far as acceptance of angulation is concerned, the fourth and the fifth metacarpal have very decent amount of mobility at the CMC joint, at the carpometacarpal joint, and hence they accept angulation of the metacarpal neck even up to 30 to 40 degrees. Metacarpal 5 is expected to accept a deformity even up to 50 degrees, though it would also depend upon the patient's vocation. Metacarpal 2 and 3, the index and the ring finger, they have very little mobility of the carpometacarpal joint, so no compensation happens if there is any angulation at the metacarpal neck. Therefore, not more than 10 to 15 degrees of deformity is acceptable. Remember, no angulation in coronal plane or no rotation is acceptable at the metacarpal neck. The next level of fracture are the long oblique fractures of the metacarpal. These can be treated with K wires, but not very easy to treat with K wires. If you have a spiral fracture which has a problem of rotation, or a transverse fracture which is a highly unstable variety of fracture according to the AO classification, and long oblique fractures which lead to shortening, these are the 3 types of fractures which perhaps do better with plate fixations. When you have a fracture of a metacarpal with very well aligned rotation, and it is a contained metacarpal. The neighboring metacarpals are intact. You can even treat it non-operatively. If you have multiple metacarpal fractures, then however, you need to do some kind of fixation. And when you have a short oblique fractures like this, or transverse fractures which are relatively undisplaced, you can simply use KYs to fix them. However, as I told you, if you have a transverse fracture, which I had attempted to fix with a K wire, with intermediary wires like this, see the fracture went on to heal, but this K wires which backed out caused EPL rupture. You can see the dropped EPL in this patient. The fracture went on to heal, but it led to an EPL rupture. So therefore, for a second metacarpal fracture, my preferred method of treatment is a plate fixation, following all the standard principles of plating and early mobilization. So my choice of K-wire is for the fifth metacarpal neck fracture. Most other fractures I like to use methods other than K-wires. A long spiral fracture like this, it's not easy to treat this fracture with K-wires. You can, it can still be treated with an axial K-wire and a transosseous wire or a cerclage wire. My method here was to treat an interfragmentary screw. Metacarpal base fractures, uh, typically the fifth metacarpal base fracture, these are stable fractures, and they heal very well. And just pinning the fifth metacarpal base fracture, which is common other than the first metacarpal fracture. First metacarpal fracture is a topic of different discussion altogether, the Bennett's and the Rolando and the extraarticular fracture. So the second, third, fourth metacarpal base fractures are uncommon. The fifth metacarpal base fracture is the common among the four, and it may just require K wires to hold it in position and to maintain length. Though, as I told you, the first metacarpal base fracture is a different ball game altogether. This is method of treating a Bennett's fracture using K wires. Now, whenever we are treating Bennett's fracture using K wires, idea is to maintain the metacarpal in an extended position. Okay, you can see the deforming forces where the long abductor, the abductor pollicis longus tendon is pulling the metacarpal down, and the adductor muscle is causing adduction, and that is the deforming force. To negate that, you need to push the metacarpal base into reduction and keep the metacarpal extended. Now, in this position, to hold it in an extended position away from the second metacarpal, you need to put a wire from the first metacarpal into the second metacarpal. The wire across the fracture is absolutely not necessary. Once you hold it in reduction, you can just put this wire and a plaster and it would still go on to heal. When you have a Rolando fracture, of course, K wires is not a great option. I would put a plate fixation. So metacarpal fractures, especially of the index and the middle finger, do not tolerate any deformity. Therefore, they are best treated with rigid fixation, as we discussed before. Whereas for intermedullary pinning, the best situation for intermedullary pinning is the fifth metacarpal. As far as phalangeal fractures are concerned, the review of literature does say K wires are better than plates. They cause less extensor tendon adhesions. There are articles which say the plates and screws will give comparable results as compared to K wires, but there really has been no real comparison between the two methods of fixation. This is the metacarpal base fractures, P1 base fracture. Now, this is one fracture where I feel use of K wires requires very high level of skills. In my practice, this fracture typically goes in for a plate osteosynthesis. However, if you were to treat this with anything other than plate, make sure that there is no rotational malalignment. Otherwise, it's going to lead to a lot of deformity. And then it is going to require an open reduction. Now, if you have to treat this by a K-wire fixation, passing K-wires through the base is not a great idea because there are sagittal bands on either side. So the wires are best passed through the head of the P1, not exactly head. It is a collateral recess in P1. I will just show you how. That is the correction. And then you can maintain the reduction in a safe position, which is 90 degrees of flexion at the metacarpophalangeal joint and complete extension of the IP joints. This is another fracture, again treated without any open reduction, just by a static traction, but with metacarpophalangeal joint in 90 degrees flexion and IP joint in extension, with a suture pass through the nail plate. However, if you have multiple phalangeal fractures, then I think that is a very clear indication where you may need a plate osteosynthesis. So when you are putting K wires in the proximal phalanx, your point of entry or the most important landmark is your collateral recess. It is easily identifiable under C-arm. That is where your collateral ligament is attached. And from here, you can pass intramedullary K wires. Again, pre-bent K wires. The tips are bent, and these are 1 millimeter flexible K wires. These are pre-bent. So this is how you will pass K wires in the proximal phalanx. So naturally, this method of fixation is useful only for fractures which affect this area. Anything beyond this, this method of fixation may not work. So this is how you put this wires to the collateral recess, and 2 K wires flexible, the tips are cut. The wires take hold in the soft metacarpal bone and prevent rotational malalignment. If you have fractures of the middle phalanx like this, now one of the most difficult fractures to treat in hand is the P2 fracture, or the middle phalanx fracture. One, this bone is highly sclerotic, takes very long time to heal, has no medullary canal. There is virtually no medullary canal here. So if even passing couple of K wires becomes very, very difficult. As you can see, very thin K wires have completely filled the medullary canal. Here, wherever there is an intra-articular element, as here, intra-articular element should be fixed using a stable method of fixation. Like here, it is a 1 millimeter screw that has been passed, and then the metacarpal element has been fixed within K wires. As you can see here, hardly any medullary canal, and therefore the treatment of choice here was to pass a screw. So always look at your X-rays carefully. Again, middle phalanx. This is P1 of the thumb. Similar articular. It's a TY type of fracture. So here it is fixed. The analogy can be drawn for a P2 of the finger. Again, open reduction, multiple transverse K wires, and then metafacial fixation and neutralizing external fixator. As I told you, for thumb, external fixator is very useful. However, if you do not use the fixator correctly, as it was done in this case, it was a beautiful outcome. See, almost similar looking fracture. If you use a fixator without reduction of the fracture, it is never going to work. Therefore, you need to apply fixator only after the fracture has been completely reduced and aligned, and fixator is simply a method of immobilization instead of a plaster or a plate or K wires. Do not expect the fixator to do the job of reduction. Then the last part of my talk is the fractures of the terminal phalanx. The tough fractures are the commonest, the crush injuries, the nail bed injuries. Transverse fractures are quite uncommon. And then you have the vertical fractures. And of course, the base fractures, the mallet fracture. Then you have the pilon fracture, where there is a mallet element as well as there is FDP avulsion and the pure FDP avulsion. So let's go through a few examples of these. Transverse fracture of the terminal phalanx. Somebody, in our discussion, we had a discussion where somebody mentioned that the nail deformity is common. Yes, if you while passing this K wire, if you damage the nail bed, then nail deformity is very common. Whenever you have a transverse fracture like this with the nail bed lacerated, one of the most effective ways of making the nail bed heal well is to put this axial wire and use that as an internal splint. Now the trick is, these are open fracture. Of course, you can pass a K wire in a retrograde fashion from here, get it out of the other end, and then reduce the fracture and pass it back. If you do not, if you manage to put a K wire not in the medullary canal but above, then you are very likely to damage the nail bed and the germinal matrix. So if you damage the germinal matrix while putting K wires, then this is the nail deformities that you will get. You will get a deformed nail bed. You might get, and if you do not get a correct angulation, you will even get a hook nail deformity. A longitudinal split of the terminal phalanx is best treated simply by close reduction, compression with a clamp, and multiple transverse K wires. So that's multiple transverse K wire, again 0.8 K wires, high speed drill, and that is restoration of complete function. Then comes the fracture of the base of the terminal phalanx, and something which is very commonly seen is the mallet fracture. So that's your mallet fracture. If the mallet fracture involves more than 50% of the surface, it's quite likely that it will require an open reduction like this. And as I told you, whichever method of fixation I might use here, I like to put an axial K wire. So here a pull-out suture was used. You can see the pull-out suture button here and an axial K wire. This K wire is 1.2 millimeter K wire. I may use a couple of K wires to fix that fragment, but again an axial K wire to immobilize it. Another very good method for treating mallet fractures is what is called the Ishiguro technique. I really love this method, and this is the commonest method that I employ for treating mallet fractures now. So how is this done? If you just enlarge this displaced mallet fracture, then I will explain to you how a Ishiguro wiring is done. So with this picture, I would flex the DIP joint by 50-60 degrees, thereby creating a space for this fracture to sit in. Now I will take a K wire, 1.2 millimeter K wire, insert it between the head of P2 and the fracture fragment, and now I would turn the K wire over. I would turn the K wire over to push the fragment into reduction. Once that is done, I will drive the K wire into the neck of the P2. With this K wire now blocking extension of this fragment, the terminal phalanx is now straightened. Now this K wire does not allow this fragment to displace. When you straighten the terminal phalanx, it causes good amount of compression between the fractured fragment and the terminal phalanx. In this position, you pass an axial K wire. Now, with this fragment locked between two K wires, it goes on to have a predictable healing. This is an example of a Ishiguro wiring. Now, big advantage of this wiring is the freedom with which the patient can use the hand during healing period without any fear of losing the reduction or without any fear of causing lengthening of the extensor tendon, maintaining good hygiene. And I try to lock these K wires outside. Either I twist them together or I put a small Jess clamp, so it prevents pulling out of the wire. That is the healing of the same fracture that we saw before with complete extension. The next common injuries is the proximal phalanx. Now this is a completely wrong way of using K wire to fix proximal phalanx PIP joint fracture dislocation. Now over a period of time, I have realized that there is virtually no role of K wire fixation in PIP joint injuries, except when you want to use this wire to create a Suzuki frame. In almost all other situations, either it requires a good repair with suture materials or anchors, or a screw or a plate fixation. So there is virtually no role of K wires in the PIP joint fracture dislocation. One of the places where I do find a role is when we use this wire as a extension block wiring. So extension block wiring, when do we use in PIP joint fracture dislocations? When you want to maintain the PIP joint in 30 degrees flexion after a PIP joint fracture dislocation which has been reduced. If the joint remains reduced in 30 degrees of flexion, then extension block K wiring is one of the ways of maintaining that 30 degrees of flexion. You would also want to use extension block wiring after a volar plate arthroplasty, as has been done in this case. This is a case of a volar plate arthroplasty. So extension block wiring is a very effective method of maintaining flexion attitude of the PIP joint while permitting further flexion. Other than that, I really find no role of K wires in the PIP joint fracture dislocation or PIP joint injuries. To summarize, K wires can be used as supporting devices, intermolary devices, flexion devices, blocking devices, manipulation devices. They are simply tools to be used in a very, very well-planned solution. They are not the ones which are to be used instinctively. And just because you put a K wire, everything is not going to be okay. Many times, a simple method of fixation, that is K wire, is used as an excuse for accepting a very poor reduction. That is not the case. You still need to maintain you still need to maintain joints in good position. You still need to get good fracture reductions. You still need to get good soft tissue repairs. Then K wires will do their job. By themselves, they are not going to offer any advantage. Thank you very much. I'm happy
Thank you
to
very
take
much.
questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for the fantastic presentation. Just a small question for you, sir. This is regarding the Suzuki frame, because Suzuki frame probably is one of the best ways of actually getting a PIP joint area fracture to heal well. Could you just explain a bit more about the Suzuki frame, how you actually do it? And
one moment, I will just stop sharing. Yeah. Okay. So I did not put any extra of the Suzuki frame because I do not do one. Okay. But I agree it is one of the very good methods of doing fixing a PIP joint fracture dislocation. Now it requires, can you see my hand?
yes, sir.
Yeah. Now it requires a 9-inch K wire, 1.2 millimeter K wire. One K wire is passed at the transverse axis of the P1, transverse axis of P1 on either side, and then this wire is bent at 90 degrees, keeping 5 to 7 millimeter distance on either side. Then second K wire, 1.2 millimeter, is passed transversely across the head, across the neck of P1, again in a in the same axis like P1 head. You put it in P2 head, and again this is bent 90 degrees. Now this is a shorter wire. Your P1 wire goes ahead of your P2 wire. Now these two wires are connected with a rubber band, so accordingly you need to bend their tips. Now when you have a rubber band which is between these two wires, your P2 wire gets pulled away, and that is how it affects the traction. Now you need to add a third wire at the base of P2 to push it into reduction from dorsal to volar. So you already have a wire which is going from P1 transversely like this on either side. Now if you put a transverse wire here and allow it to go volar to these two limbs of the wire, that will ensure that P2 does not translate dorsally, and that completes your Suzuki frame. Now I personally don't use it because I find open reduction of the PIP joint fracture dislocations far more reliable method of treating proximal phalanx fractures. Treating PIP joint fracture dislocation. And most PIP joint fracture dislocations may not need open reductions too. Only those which are unstable, which do not remain stable in 30 degrees flexion, are the ones which are likely to require open reduction. And I'm very happy to do the open reduction because the approach is very simple. It is possible to fix these fractures stably and mobilize them early. However, there is enough literature to support use of Suzuki frame. There are hand surgeons who swear by Suzuki frame, but I do not use one. I have not used one in last 2 decades, and I do not regret it.
So what about long aluminum splint traction for the PIP joint fractures and all? Is it still,
Oh,
is there some role for that, or is it?
for PIP joint fracture dislocation, no, because the guidelines for PIP joint fracture dislocation are very, very clear. Though that was not part of my talk, let me just give a very brief summary. If you see a PIP joint fracture dislocation, the dorsal dislocation is the commonest. So let's talk about the dorsal dislocation. Everybody will agree that it's very easily possible to reduce the dislocation by maintaining the joint in flexion. So if the fractured volar fragment is less than 50%, and if the joint reduces in about 30 degrees flexion, all you need to do is extension block splinting. And then you need to mobilize these joints early. Remember, these are intra-articular fractures. Therefore, giving any static splint is not a good idea. Either it has to be dynamic splint like dynamic traction like Suzuki, or you need to do extension block splinting where further flexion is allowed, or you do a open reduction and you do early mobilization. Immobilizing an intra-articular fracture is never a good idea. It will always lead to a stiffness. Now, if your joint remains unstable in 30 degrees flexion, as would happen in cases where the volar fragment is more than 50%, that is almost a fracture of necessity. These are the cases where you necessarily have to fix these fractures. And therefore, a static aluminum splint is not going to work. And since most of the hand surgeons are not afraid of digital nerves and vessels, they are trained to handle flexor tendons with care. These are the only structures which come here, the neurovascular on either side and the flexor tendon in between. The moment you retract the flexor tendon on one side, you have complete access to the PIP joint, and it's very easy to fix it. And therefore, I very strongly believe hand surgeons, whether they are with plastic surgery background or with orthopedic background, should choose to fix these volar lip fractures rather than trying to look for ways of not doing an open reduction, because the orthopedic surgeons are afraid to go near digital neurovascular bundles, and plastic surgeons may not be familiar with screw fixation techniques. So these are the two main reasons why people would want to use a static fixator or a traction. I would say open reduction, irrespective of our fears, is the right way to go about this.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Dr. Madhukar has got a question. So how do we do extensor tendon repair in Ishiguro technique? Okay, please explain.
So Ishiguro technique is for a bony avulsion, bony mallet. So it is obviously not for a extensor tendon closed injury. For closed injury, I would take a H shape or a Y shape incision, repair it using 50 or 60 Prolene, and then put an axial K wire as an internal splint.
Yeah.